Update. Am I the a-hole for not going back to my wife after she threatened to call the cops on me? Original post. My wife and I recently welcomed our 6-month-old baby. And since my wife returned from the hospital, it feels like everything has changed drastically. Before this, we were the kind of couple you'd think had it all. Never argued, always happy, and just solid. But now, it's like the person I knew and loved is gone. Her anger and resentment toward me are so intense, I can practically feel it whenever I'm near her. I tried to brush it off, thinking it might just be the exhaustion and stress from having a newborn, but it only got worse. After months of tiptoeing around, I finally reached my limit. 2 days ago, it all exploded. We got into a terrible fight that quickly turned into a shouting match. I couldn't believe the things we were saying to each other. It was the worst fight we've ever had, and in the middle of it, she screamed that she'd call the police on me. That statement stopped me cold. I wasn't even yelling anymore. I was just standing there, stunned. I felt betrayed and heartbroken, like a stranger was standing in front of me, not the woman I'd married. When she finally stormed off to another room, I just sat there in silence, unable to process what had happened. I felt like I was backed into a corner. It hit me hard that this wasn't just some heated argument we'd look back on and laugh about later. This was something that could change my life in ways I couldn't imagine. I didn't want to be in a situation where I was at risk of having the police involved over a misunderstanding or an accusation. So I made a decision. I grabbed whatever I could think of, some clothes, my phone, and my keys, and left. Now I'm staying at a friend's place. He's been really supportive, but he says I'm just not myself these days. And he's right. I feel like a shell of the person I was. My wife, meanwhile, has been reaching out, saying she wants to talk. My mother-in-law even came over with my baby, asking me to hold her and see if that might help heal things. But I had to refuse. As much as it hurt to say no, I knew that if I held my daughter, I'd be tempted to go back home. And then what? Go back into a situation where a single argument could lead to a call to the cops? My mother-in-law is trying to mediate, making excuses for my wife. She's telling me that my wife didn't mean it, that it was just words said in the heat of the moment. But that's not something you can take lightly. I can't just forget that she threw that threat out there. It changes the entire foundation of trust we built over the years. My mind is constantly spinning, and a sense of loss weighs heavy on me. I lost my home, my wife, my child, and a life we built together all in one moment. People tell me to just talk it out with her, that maybe I'm overreacting. But how do you talk out something like this? How do you go back to normal after feeling betrayed like that? I'm dealing with depression on top of everything else, and I keep questioning if there's even a path forward for us. Is there a way to forgive and forget? Or has the trust really been shattered beyond repair? Now for the top comments before reading the update 25 days later. Can you explain why the threat of cops being called is an issue at all? Are there marks on her? Do you have warrants? You can't go to jail for having a verbal argument. Cops don't care if my kind has done anything bad, they just shoot. I don't have warrants, but I have had cops harassing me for hours for simply walking. I don't even remember why verbal argument started, but it was a mix of everything wrong with me, my family, and other BS. Can I ask how your wife was radiating hatred? Did you talk to her about how you felt? Did she know you thought she hated you? What do you mean when you say you snapped? What does that entail exactly? Was there something specific you said or did that made your wife threaten to call the cops? Or did it just come out of nowhere? Did she say what she was gonna tell them when they got there? You said after tolerating a lot you snapped. What did she do that you were tolerating? Do you know anything about PPD or other postpartum conditions? Would you recognize the symptoms? I know that's a lot of questions, but I just feel like there's a lot of context missing here that could drastically change the story. Would you be asking the context if OP was a woman? Extreme personality change is a mental health emergency considering you have a helpless infant. Yes, PPD is real, and sickness and health are in the vows usually. It's her first baby, and she doesn't even realize it probably. And so what? If he does get falsely accused and ends up having his life ruined, at least he fulfilled his vows? This is insane. As somebody that has been arrested due to both a woman and laws in place, he will get screwed. My state has a mandatory arrest for a DV call. Dude will only make his life more difficult. I was in jail with a guy who called the cops on his wife for punching him, and he was in there with me. Now for the update. I did talk to her on the phone, and she can't seem to comprehend why I was so upset that she threatened to call the cops on me. It was like she couldn't wrap her head around the gravity of what she has done. She did apologize, but she still thinks I overreacted. As soon as I left, my eating disorder vanished. Then when I talked to her on the phone, the depression started settling again. I have filed for divorce. I have no clue what the divorce will look like, but one thing I know is that I will never feel safe with my wife again ever. Divorce is the right thing to do, for both of us. Don't talk to her on the phone or in person without a lawyer present. Text her or email her that all communication must be through a lawyer going forward. She was already ready to make up stories to the cops about you, which means she was full or ready to ruin your life. Don't give her the chance to make stuff up with no witnesses present to point out she's full of it. Get a voice recording app on your phone and make it easily accessible. She might try to contact you in person. Document everything. Basically, threatening to call the cops during an argument, especially when no one's getting hurt or in actual danger, is a really bad move. It's like using the police as a weapon, and it can have some seriously messed up consequences for the person on the receiving end of that threat. I'm really confused on why people are condoning divorce so quickly. Like, okay, I get it. If your wife has been threatening to call the cops on you on a regular basis, this is a fair reaction. But 6 months after giving birth with a drastic personality change, untreated PPD is a very real thing. Take some space sure to protect yourself. Document. But just jumping to divorce? Seems kinda a-holish to me. This update is 25 days later and nothing in the original post or the update suggests that the wife is doing anything to recognize it might be PPD and get it treated. If it were 2 days later, I might say bring it up and see how she reacts. But after almost a month? If she's still downplaying what she did and not mentioning working to get some sort of treatment, it suggests to me that either there's a conversation where OP mentioned it and his wife blew it off, and or that no one else in the wife's orbit has mentioned it. If OP's wife was coming from a place of, I did something really horrible, I haven't been myself, I need help, then maybe divorce isn't the only option. But if the writing is on the wall that he is going to have to fight uphill against his wife, and potentially a lot of people around her to get a PPD diagnosis and treatment to explain this, I don't blame him for walking away from that. And even if she was getting PPD treated, sometimes the betrayal that one partner does during a mental health crisis is too big to overcome. It can also be used as a tactic to minimize what she did. Like, you can't be mad at me for that, I had PPD. So a diagnosis is not always a solution in these cases. Not a-hole. Tell mother-in-law that her daughter needs counseling and perhaps medical treatment for PPD, and until that happens, you are in danger from her. You might also express the child might be in danger also, and try to get emergency custody for either yourself or your mother-in-law. Do not make any promises of reconciliation, and never be alone with your wife. I am sorry you are experiencing this, OP. I am also sorry for your wife, as she is obviously suffering some form of mental illness at the moment. However, you need to protect yourself first and foremost. See if the lawyer can file something with police as she keeps making threats, etc. Next story. Am I the a-hole for using my scared pregnant wife's cravings against her to drive her to the hospital during labor when she absolutely wouldn't? My wife and I have been together for 6 years, and a few months ago we welcomed our first child, a beautiful baby girl. However, the tension between us began on the day of our daughter's birth and hasn't let up since. In the final 2 months of her pregnancy, my wife was overwhelmed with anxiety about giving birth. As her due date approached, she became so distressed that she couldn't even speak with her doctor without breaking down at the mere mention of labor. She seemed to be in denial, as if ignoring it would somehow make it go away. I tried to encourage her to see a therapist or at least talk to someone, but she shut me down every time, insisting she just wasn't ready. On the day she went into labor, she was clearly experiencing strong contractions, yet she kept insisting they were minor and refused to go to the hospital. My mother, her mother, both of our sisters, and I all tried to reason with her, but nothing seemed to get through. She was determined to stay home, even though she was obviously in active labor. At that point, my sister and I knew we had to step in. Throughout her pregnancy, my wife had been craving churros, so my sister casually mentioned she was going to pick up some, hoping this might coax her out of the house. My wife, eager for the distraction, agreed to go along. However, my sister and I had already decided we were taking her straight to the hospital. When she realized our plan, her face fell. She started to cry and panic in the car, but we knew it was the only way. Thankfully, everything went smoothly, and she delivered safely. Both she and the baby were healthy. It's been a few months, but my wife continues to bring up that day, throwing it in my face whenever we argue. Each time, I apologize and reassure her, explaining that I understood her fear and that my intentions were only for her safety and our babies. There was no ill will, yet she continues to paint me as if I had done something terrible. This time, when she brought it up again, I finally snapped. I told her that if she thinks she's helping our marriage by being this way, she's wrong. I told her that if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't hesitate, because in that moment, I couldn't trust her judgment for the safety of herself and our baby. I explained that I would no longer engage in this conversation unless she's willing to communicate in a constructive, healthy way. In response, she accused me of dismissing and stonewalling her, calling me an a-hole for standing firm on wanting productive communication. I don't respond well to name-calling, especially since I've never spoken to her or anyone in that way. My frustration boiled over and I ended up saying something I now regret. Talk to me in that tone again and you'll be a single mom real quick. She hasn't stopped crying since. I feel terrible because I know my words were harsh, but I felt like I needed to stand up for myself after months of being constantly berated. Now I'm questioning if I went too far or if this was the only way to get through to her. Now for the top comments. If you still want to remain married, I suggest speaking to her healthcare provider and therapists, or reach out to service providers to see why she is acting this way. They also need to see a counselor. It's never a bad idea, but wife needs it yesterday. OP does not. Not the a-hole, but you have a bigger problem. She was putting herself and your baby at risk. She does not sound mentally sound. If she cannot see that still after all this time, you have a big problem that needs professional intervention. Yeah, for real. I can understand being upset at that time, especially since she was dealing with so much anxiety. I had panic attacks at the thought of giving birth when I was pregnant with my first. It's an absolute horrifying thought. She should be able to look at the situation now and understand that OP stepped up and made a hard choice to take matters into his own hands. He kept his wife and child safe. I'm really not sure what she thought was going to happen otherwise. Last story. Am I the a-hole for wanting to leave my husband after he blamed me for our baby's death and started treating me like an animal? 2 years ago, we lost our 8-month-old son to pneumonia. I was devastated, and the guilt and pain have never left me. I did everything I could for him. I took him to every appointment, gave him his medication, and followed all the doctor's orders. But even after all that, he didn't survive. I thought my husband and I would grieve together, but instead, he has spent these 2 years blaming me, constantly reminding me that a better mother wouldn't have let this happen. The worst part is how he treats me now. Since our son's death, he's turned cold and cruel, treating me like an animal. He's openly disrespectful, dismissive, and degrading, and he brings up our son's death at every opportunity to paint me as a failure. It hurts even more because he's taken this grief as a free pass to cheat on me, and I'm just expected to accept it. A few months ago, I saw him in the mall with another woman. They were walking together, laughing, and he looked happy. I confronted them both on the spot, hoping he'd at least feel some shame, but instead he got furious. He turned it around on me as saying I had no right to be upset when, according to him, I'm the reason he lost his son in the first place. He even told the woman I was unstable, and she looked at me with pity, like I was some kind of deranged ex. That moment felt like I hit rock bottom. Now I'm at a breaking point. I don't know if I can take any more of his abuse, accusations, or infidelity. But every time I consider leaving, I feel like he'll just tell everyone that I abandoned him and couldn't handle my supposed guilt. Some people in his family already think I'm the reason our son died, thanks to what he's been saying behind my back. It's like he set me up to look like a monster no matter what I do. Am I the a-hole for finally wanting to walk away from this marriage? Or am I selfish for even thinking of leaving him while he's still grieving, even if his grief has turned into resentment and cruelty toward me? Not the a-hole. He abandoned you 2 years ago. Filed for divorce stating the reason is abuse and infidelity. Tell everyone what happens behind closed doors. He is verbally and mentally abusing you. If it is your fault, then he should recognize that it's more his than anyone's. Did he drive your child to appointments? Of course he didn't. Did he do everything in his power like you? It seems not. I'm sorry for your loss, and I hope you can escape this POS so you can heal. He did abandon me emotionally long ago, but I've been clinging to the idea that we could somehow rebuild, even as he's torn me down. I needed to hear that it's okay to be honest about what's really happening, and that filing for divorce isn't a failure on my part. Your point about his lack of involvement really hit home. I realize I've been carrying the weight of this alone. He's purposely treating you like garbage so he can get rid of you, plus play the victim again for being abandoned. You know he's the victim no matter what you do, so you might as well leave and get your life back. I hope you can get some grief counseling. What he said and done is totally unhinged and unacceptable. Not the a-hole. No parent should have to endure the loss of a child, and it's heartbreaking that your husband has turned his grief into something so cruel and destructive. You did everything you could for your son, and no one has the right to blame you for his illness or his passing. The way your husband is treating you, using your son's death to manipulate, control, and degrade you, is abusive and completely unacceptable. You deserve support, compassion, and a chance to heal, not to be treated like this. Walking away from this toxic behavior is not selfish. It's an act of self-preservation. You have every right to prioritize your well-being and find a path to healing, even if that means leaving him. It's been incredibly hard, and sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind trying to justify staying with someone who constantly twists my grief into something I should be ashamed of. I love my son with everything I had, and hearing someone else say I did my best helps more than you know. Part of me keeps hoping my husband will come around, but with everything he's done and said, I'm realizing that his pain doesn't excuse his cruelty. Your words make me feel a little less alone and a bit more justified in thinking about leaving and focusing on my own healing. Update. Am I the a-hole for going off on my wife because she teases me even though our bedroom is dead? Original post. I, 32 male, am married to my wife, 32 female, for 6 years and together for 9 years. Our sex life gradually diminished into nothing after 3rd year of our marriage. We do not have children as of now. I handle my part of chores in the household, if not even more due to me working from home and being available mostly. I do show her non-sexual attention and gestures, such as massaging, kisses, being emotionally available, and other things. I explain these because people tend to find fault from my side first, after I tell them about the situation. I try to have many talks with my wife about it, but it all boils down to, we are not married just for sex, stop thinking with your thing down there, and so on. However, she does not stop herself from teasing me. She'll talk about sex, but just reject me afterwards and go to sleep. She'll be flirty, but nothing in the end. I ask her if it's a kink, and if it is, I am not comfortable with such a thing, especially as our sexual life is in shambles. She said it's not a kink, and she genuinely does not feel in the mood. I told her to stop teasing me then. Yesterday was our anniversary and we had a great day together. She implied sex and teased me a lot during our time. I was hopeful that we'll do something in the end. Guess what? Once we stepped inside the house, she just showered and went to bed. Cool, I think I should approach. I tried and got rejected in the end. I lost it at that moment and just shouted my frustration at her. I told her I am going to divorce her. I packed my clothes and some important belongings and left for a hotel. She tried to stop me but could not. She has been calling me nonstop, but I just need peace of mind right now. It's just frustrating. Being together with someone but feeling alone and unwanted sucks. On top of that, she gives me hope only to destroy it. I called my lawyer friend this morning and will start the divorce proceedings this Monday. I am just done at this point. Am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments before reading the update. Not the a-hole. It's really messed up to lead a person on like that, especially your own husband. Not the a-hole. Emotional teasing with no follow-through is cruel. You deserve a respectful partner. I used to think cruel and unusual would at the bare minimum involve batteries and some cables connected to balls. After reading OP's piece, I'm changing my position. How can she say they did not just marry for sex and find it normal that they have not had any form of sex for years? Just marrying for sex implies that there actually still is some sex. And leading you on and dropping your butt on an anniversary is almost unforgivable. I understand if they aren't in the mood and say no, but 6 years? I almost have to think she's getting it from somewhere else. You might be the a-hole for the outburst, depending on exactly what and how it was said, but your feelings are valid AF. Best analogy I've heard regarding this situation. You don't buy a house for the bathroom, but you wouldn't buy a house that didn't have a bathroom. You don't enter a relationship just for sex, but you can't have a proper relationship without it. Some people do have sexless marriages, but that is by choice. Divorce her and move on. She had her chance to fix things and blew it. I do think she has the emasculation kink whether she realizes it or not. She gets off on the empowerment aspect of cucking you this way. As an asexual woman, this is exactly what I came here to say. My husband isn't ace, but he married me knowing what was up, and we have an agreement he's happy with. We chose this life together, and I've never entertained a relationship with him if he had needs I knew I never intended to meet, let alone rile him up about it and make him think I was going to. Can you imagine this as a different need? Partner knows their spouse has needs for physical affection and emotional reassurance. Keeps offering to talk, only to walk off and refuse to provide that time, and again leaving their partner emotionally constipated and alone with their emotional needs unmet. None would suggest they stay ever. If OP's wife had the best benefit of the doubt and really doesn't know how cruel this is, then she needs therapy big time. Otherwise, to hell with that abuse. Not the a-hole. Just leave, man. It's not worth it. Trust me. Incompatibility like this is bad enough without her leading you on as well. That's messed up manipulative. Now for the update. Just came back from local courthouse after presenting the divorce intention document to the family court. A friend filled out my info on a one-pager draft, and that was it. I called my wife to let her know I started the process and I'm okay with 50-50 everything. She called for marriage counseling and told me I should take what I did back. I realized I'm extremely burnt out by trying and do not want to try anymore. That's what 3 years of trying with no results does to someone, I guess. I told her we can have a separation counseling near the end of the divorce, so we can understand the relationship from each other's points and end it amicably. She tried to talk with me, but I asked her to please make it easy for both of us and hung up. She is messaging me and calling me still, but I have no intention of talking to her if lawyers are not involved right now. My lawyer friend told me it's okay to leave the house as we do not own it anyways. I'll be staying with my parents for now. Next update will be once the divorce is completed. Hopefully it will be in a few months, not years. There were a lot of comments on the original post and I cannot answer all of them. Thank you for all the advice and help. I'm struggling to think what she feels she could possibly say now that'll fix things. I love you, I'll change, let me make it up to you. All of which will lead to nothing but the same thing within 5 days if OP takes her back. It's all empty promises. Action speaks louder than words, and she's already shown her true colors. I remember the first girl I had sex with stopped wanting it. There was a lot of trauma there, and the sex we did have was really bad and really boring. She didn't want to do anything at all. After we broke up, she asked me to give her a chance, give her a weekend. She'll come over to my dorm, my roommate was out of town for the weekend, and she'll give me the sex I deserve, and I'll bring all the condoms we had. We need them. She showed up. I made my interests known. She kissed me, teased me, went, oopsies, I forgot the condom. Guess we're just going to spend a weekend cuddling and not having any. You ask her for years. Now she wants to work on it. Get on with your life. Find someone that you are compatible with. Much love. Stay strong. More than just that. She told him that he needed to take back what he said. F that noise. She seems incapable of realizing what she constantly did to him is wrong, and is putting the blame on him. I'm reluctant to judge too quickly, but really seems like signs of narcissism at least. I agree. Her having issues with libido or body image would be one thing, and completely understandable. However, her consistently teasing him just to shut him down when it comes time is beyond cruel. It's not like she can say she thought she'd be in the mood and turned out not to be. That can happen sometimes, but not every time for years on end. It's like she enjoys feeling desired and didn't care how it made him feel in the process when she shut him down time and time again. She seems very dismissive of Hopi's feelings in general. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my wife there's nothing weird about me giving away my niece at her wedding and that my wife has no say in it at all? Original post. My niece, 26 female, has her wedding in a month and she wants me to give her away at her wedding. Her father passed away when she was really young, and I felt a moral obligation to help my sister and her daughter, because my sister too helped me a lot growing up. I knew I had an obligation to my wife and children primarily, but that didn't mean I couldn't help out my sister and her daughter too. Since they live just 10 minutes from us, I tried to be as physically active as possible in my niece's life when she's growing up. My wife and I have had a few arguments on it over the years. I have also been sending money to my sister every month for the past decade or so. It is from my individual account, not the joint account my wife and I share, so I have full liberty to spend it however I want. But my wife does know about it, and we had arguments on this too. Now coming to the point, my niece wants me to give her away at her wedding next month, but my wife thinks it's very weird and she doesn't want me to do it. I told my wife there's nothing weird about it, and her opinion on this is irrelevant. We have had a lot of discussions on this over the past week, and I am made to feel like a bad guy by my wife. Am I the bad guy? Am I the a-hole if I were to give my niece at her wedding? Now for the top comments before reading the update. I am confused why that is weird. You are walking her down the aisle at her wedding. What is the problem? Not the a-hole. You should like a caring uncle and brother. Saying your wife's opinion is irrelevant to her making it a problem is deserved. Sorry, not sorry. I don't get it either. Seems a normal thing for an uncle to walk a bride down the aisle in a place of a deceased father. My brother and I walked my sister down the aisle at her renewal ceremony because our dad had passed. What reasoning did your wife have for it being weird? She's given many reasons. Like, for example, one reason being that we have a daughter who isn't married yet, and she feels like I'm closer to my niece than my daughter, which isn't true at all. And then she says symbolically, me going to my niece's wedding as her father figure while my sister being there as her mother. She thinks it's weird. She's hinting at it looking incestuous? Is that the point she's trying to make? 99.9% of people would just think it's sweet that her uncle is walking her down the aisle. If that's what your wife is hinting at, then she needs some therapy. She's the weird one for sure, not the a-hole. Yeah, that's so weird. An uncle who has acted as a father figure is the perfect person to walk a niece down the aisle. Nothing about that would make me think of anything incestuous at all. She seems like she's got a weird jealousy towards the sister that is misplaced. I walked my sister down the aisle because my dad refused to go to her wedding. OP, nothing weird about it. Your wife has some underlying issues and she's choosing this as a lashing out point. The issue is not here, it's elsewhere and she's manifesting it here. Good luck, buddy. Now for the update. Reading the comments on my last post made me feel a bit better about everything. To be honest, all these discussions I've had with my wife, it just gets extremely tiring, and I sometimes start feeling guilty about everything, but reading the comments made me feel better. I had a discussion again with my wife last night. I didn't show her the post because a lot of the comments were pretty harsh towards her, but I did feel confident last night when we had a discussion. We came to a decision that I would walk my niece down the aisle, but we would also go to marriage counseling because my wife had a lot of things to get off her chest. I asked my wife what some of those things were, and she said the primary issue was that she felt like I was playing happy family with my sister and my niece all these years, and that she feels like I have taken the role of a significant other to my sister, which I disagreed with, but we'll speak about it in marriage counseling. She then talked about how she sometimes wished she was my sister instead of my wife, because she wished she had the same emotional connection with me that I had with my sister. I didn't really know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. She then talked about how I've been more of a father to my niece than to our daughter, but I disagreed again, because my daughter and I always have been close, and I've never sensed any resentment from my daughter. Again, something we'll both talk about in marriage counseling. So that is it for the update. A pretty exhausting discussion, but marriage counseling should hopefully help. I am glad I will be able to walk my niece down the aisle because she said it really means a lot to her. I think it's odd that your wife would look at a relationship between siblings and compare it to her marriage. But it's also obvious that her emotional needs have not been met over the years. So who are we to belittle what she may genuinely feel? Good luck to you both in counseling, and I hope it helps to resolve the underlying issues in your marriage. Congrats to your niece. I think if you take sex out of the equation, it makes perfect sense. If OP has in fact been a more present and dependable partner to his sister, then I would totally get where his wife is coming from. Obviously, I don't know, and her choosing to draw the line at the wedding was weird. I think it was just a bunch of little stuff that added up, and the wedding was the straw that broke the camel's back. It's impossible to know, and not really helpful to speculate since we are only getting one perspective. She could be jealous and clingy. He could be emotionally absent in favor of his sister and niece. Maybe they just have different perspectives/expectations that a good marriage counselor can help them navigate in a healthy way. You should have a private conversation with your daughter and ask her how she feels about your relationship with her cousin. Since you have missed some of your wife's emotional needs, it is possible you have missed some of your daughter's needs. I really would love to know what daughter thinks, and how old is the daughter? My daughter is 26 too. We are both honest with each other, and she admits that my niece's upcoming wedding did make her a bit jealous, but she is really happy for my niece. You don't need to financially support your niece or sister anymore. I think your wife feels like she and your daughter are in second place compared to your sister and niece. I think you may have been emotionally absent as a husband and father, and that's why your wife is angry. Sounds like she's just tired of always being not enough. Stop dismissing her concerns. Her feelings should always be important to you, same as her opinion. OP, I think you're going to get a hell of a shock in counseling when your wife starts sharing her feelings. You can't tell her they're irrelevant then. Last story. Am I the a-hole for banning my 5-year-old sister from my wedding unless she gets therapy before the wedding? I just want to start off by saying I, 24 female, love my baby's sister more than anything in the world. I drive a 3-row car because it was able to fit her and my other siblings, 9 female and 7 male, and some of their friends. My fiancé and I watch the kids after school every day, and they spend the nights with us 2 to 4 days a week. My fiancé is great with kids, and they adore him. My fiancé proposed 6 months ago, and when we told the kids, the older 2 were excited. But Evie, the 5-year-old, was furious. She started crying and hitting me because she wanted to marry him, and if I marry him, she can't. She refused to speak to me for almost a week, and now she's mostly okay, but she gets mad at me and starts crying and hitting me anytime she sees me kiss him. She was supposed to be our flower girl, but I really don't think she'll be able to sit through the wedding without some kind of outburst, so I called our dad, told him about all of this, and said that she won't be allowed to attend the wedding unless she starts seeing a therapist before the wedding. The wedding is in September, so he has a couple of months to get her in therapy. He's saying she doesn't need therapy. She's just a 5-year-old with a crush on my fiancé. I'm overreacting, and she won't forgive me if I exclude her from the wedding. Am I the a-hole for banning her unless she gets her therapy? Where are the parents? Why is no one telling her that she can't behave this way? You mean the parents who pawn their kids off on OP all the time? We do tell her she can't behave this way. Who is we? Are there consequences? Violence and biting until someone bleed is a danger sign. Is this even real? Me and my fiancé. She sits in time out every time this happens, and if this happens outside of the house, we'll leave and take her home. My fiancé even refuses to play with her after, and tells her that he doesn't play with people that hit. Still wondering where her parents are. Not very involved. Why the heck did they have so many kids if they don't want to be involved? You and your fiancé need to distance yourselves from them, and your father needs to figure this out. Who is the mother? Is she your mother as well? Stop wasting your life on other people's kids. We have different moms. Their mom doesn't seem to want anything to do with the kids if she can't get cute pictures for Insta. Dad has never been very involved. Update. My 32 male wife's 30 female friend cheated on her fiancé at her bachelorette party. My wife doesn't think it's that big of a deal. Help? Original post. A few weeks ago, my wife went to Miami for one of her best friend's bachelorette parties. After she got back, I overheard a conversation between my wife and another one of her friends who was also at the bachelorette party. Long story short, the bride-to-be cheated on her fiancé while she was there. She met a guy at a club, took him back to her hotel room, and they had sex. I was shocked. To me, this was a big deal. The wedding is in a few weeks. But my wife didn't think it was that big of a deal. She said the bride shouldn't have done it, but it was just sex with a guy she'd never see again. Just one last fling before her friends settled down. Nothing to call off a wedding for. I could not believe what I was hearing, and my thoughts immediately turned to my wife's own bachelorette party. She went to Vegas for the weekend with the same group. If she didn't think it was a big deal, did she hook up with someone while she was there? She swore on the life of our daughter that she didn't. She admitted to dancing and flirting, but nothing more. This led to a larger conversation about her thoughts on emotionless sex. Another shocker was that she admitted that if I were the type of guy who would be okay with her sleeping with other guys, she would probably do it. She knows I wouldn't be okay with it, so she has never brought it up. She again said that sex isn't love and that she has always been able to sleep with men and not get attached. Her friend thinks the same way. Now, I'm not thinking about divorce, but I feel like my entire world has been turned upside down. What does everyone think? Edit, I wanted to add one more thing that gives a little more insight into her thinking. She mentioned that if I had an affair that was purely physical, she would be able to forgive me. But if it was emotional, then it would be over. I'm the complete opposite. If my wife had an emotional affair, I'd see this as something I could fix. I don't know if that's just a guy thing or not. Now for the top advice before reading the update. My friend banged a guy. Me? Oh, I just danced and flirted. And by the way, I'd be totally up for banging random guys if you're cool with it. OP, please read this comment a few times. That would be enough of a difference in morals for me to heavily consider divorce. And I've been married to my wife for 7 years, and we have a kid. I wouldn't want someone like that raising my children. Same. I don't think I could stay if my husband knew his friend cheated on his fiancée weeks before their wedding, and not only didn't think it was a big deal, but claimed the only reason he doesn't cheat on me is because he knows I would mind. I think it would lead me to the assumption that my husband does not fundamentally respect fidelity in marriage/relationships. I think I would consider this viewpoint to be as good as cheating. If it's no big deal, why hide it from her future husband? The argument falls apart right there. That, and OP is gonna come back to the comment section with everyone on Reddit telling him it's pretty obvious his wife has cheated on him at some point. Gonna be a tough Thanksgiving for OP, lol. That's probably because she did the same at her bachelorette party, dude. Ask if she slept with anyone at her bachelorette party. When she says no, ask her why she didn't. She clearly doesn't think it's a wrong thing to do. If she says she didn't sleep with anyone out of loyalty to you, ask her why it doesn't apply here. Now for the update. Anyway, many of you told me to tell the fiancé. I debated it, but another one of my wife's friends, call her Claire, who was also at the bachelorette weekend, beat me to it. The whole scene was quite dramatic from what I heard. My wife and Claire were at the house of the friend who cheated. Call her Wendy. When the fiancé came into the room, Claire said to Wendy that she needed to tell him now, or she would. The fiancé pretty much knew what she meant, and basically broke down. There was a lot of screaming and crying. The fiancé took it really hard, and as of now, the wedding is off. My wife looked shaken when she came home. She ended up apologizing for making light of the situation, given how much pain it caused the fiancé. I told her, no kidding, and she admitted that her views on this were obviously much different than most people's. She gave me a hug and said she would never be able to live with herself if she hurt me like that. As for what happened at her bachelorette party, Claire was present for my wife's bachelorette as well. Claire and I have also been friends for years. I met my wife through her actually. So it stands to reason that she would have definitely told me if my wife slept with another guy during her bachelorette. So I suppose I'm satisfied for now. Your wife sounds somewhat low empathy, but I suppose if this concrete event of seeing others' significant distress and pain over infidelity taught her some empathy/compassion, that is a good thing. And store this memory in your mind though, as she doesn't have a solid moral compass clearly. The status update is very dramatic, but it doesn't get at the issue of whether OP and his wife have defined cheating and set boundaries in their own marriage. It is doubly important that they do this, since OP's wife doesn't seem to be on the same page as him. Good point, but I will say this is clearly a monogamous relationship. And obviously, banging a random dude and lying about it while you're in a monogamous relationship is cheating. So your wife had to have a front row seat and experience firsthand the devastating effects of cheating in order for her to finally understand why cheating is wrong, horrible, and cruel? That's still hella sus. I would never look at my wife the same way again, but if you guys are able to work past it, then all the more power to you. I hate that I agree with the sus part. Did she say she never cheated, or only that she didn't want to hurt you that way? Because if she cheated, she could avoid hurting you by never telling you. I would still have a look at the phone bill and messages. Have a heart-to-heart with Claire too. I agree it looks hella sus. Even if the friend Claire seems like she would out any cheating, it's also been a bit since the wife's own bachelorette party, and they now have a kid. If the wife was faithful or not back then, everyone is now looking at the family dynamic and keeping quiet about any possible infidelity. Last story. Update. I feel like my husband, 26 male, puts things off until I, 26 female, ends up handling things myself. Original post. My husband and I have had a rocky relationship. It's been 3 years since we got married, and I always hoped it would get a bit easier. I feel like we've tried a lot of different things to improve our relationship, but I often find myself feeling defeated and sad because it seems like nothing will ever change. Right now, we're in the process of moving. I stayed behind to finish things up at our house and is gone ahead to start working. We're literally starting from scratch. I sold everything, including our cars. We need to have a car, so I asked him to buy one and have it ready for us once I'm ready to move. He's met me with so many excuses, and I'm just tired. I'm finally flying to meet him next week and there's still no car. It's been a month. He mentioned to me offhand the other day that he was planning on buying a car once I fly in. But doesn't that defeat the purpose? All I asked was that he had one ready for when I arrived. I really don't want to go car shopping the second I get off the plane. I was excited and hopeful about the move. We talked about how things were going to change, and he seemed so motivated. But now I feel defeated again. I don't even feel angry anymore. What was I expecting? I'm not sure what advice I'm looking for. We get along pretty well when there aren't any big life decisions involved. He's a nice guy. I just don't trust him to take any responsibility in the relationship. I guess, has anyone been in a similar relationship? How did it go? When was it finally enough for you? Is there anything that can change? I'm really interested in starting couples therapy, but I'm afraid of putting effort into something that might not even work. Now for the top advice before reading the update 3 years later. My husband and I have had a rocky relationship. It's been 3 years since we've been married, and I always hoped it would get a bit easier. Hoping things get better almost never works. You said you had taken steps to improve things. Does that include counseling? If so, it is important to note that he has to want things to improve for them to get better. Based on the example behavior you provided, he sounds lazy, and I doubt he wants to improve your relationship. I don't even feel angry anymore. What was I expecting? If you've hit this point, it's probably time to cut your losses and move on. I'm sorry and good luck. Another point to consider is how he is in day-to-day life. Does he help with the chores? Does he take care of the bills? If not, he's most likely just lazy and wants to have a mommy to guide him through all the adult stuff. If not, maybe he has some kind of anxiety about doing big things without your input. Buying a car is a big thing. It should be discussed and agreed on by both parties. Maybe it's simply not a good dynamic and could be resolved by talking or getting some counseling. Hi, thanks for commenting. Everyone has been really helpful so far. There was a time when my husband wouldn't help out with chores or bills. I was cooking, cleaning, and working full-time while he got to play games. I do think he's gotten better, but there are a lot of times I still feel like I do more. I'm trying to be patient. I know people don't change overnight. It's just hard. I think I still have some hurt feelings from that time. Looking at it now, I think I hoped that if I asked him to do something more important, maybe he'd take it more seriously and be excited to contribute. I realize it's a big decision, but I've always been willing to talk about the financials and other details of the purchase. I think I would have really appreciated seeing his effort in taking over this decision. I've talked to him since posting this and we've gone over more details about the purchase, and he's actually made an appointment to start looking for cars. I'm still not 100% sure if it's purely an anxiety thing or if he is just coasting along with me, but I'm planning to organize my thoughts and talk openly about how this has made me feel once we're together. Thanks again. I've been thinking a lot about the situation. I appreciate it. My husband was bipolar and didn't take meds and was exactly like this. Not only did it start this way, but it got worse even after I had my son. I worked full-time, did all the errands, cleaning, cooking, and cared for my son. You need to put out an ultimatum, and if it tries short-term and then goes back to his old ways, cut and run. And get short-term changes, promises, gaslighting, the works. Listen to your gut, not the hope. Thanks for commenting. Bipolar disorder does run on my husband's side of the family, but I hadn't considered it. Thanks for sharing. I hope things are going well for you now. Now for the update. Hi Reddit. I made a post 3 years ago about my husband not taking the initiative when it came to purchasing a new car after a big move. My post didn't get too big, but I've always liked seeing updates, and a lot has changed in 3 years. So, I decided to log back in and make my own. After making the post, my husband made an appointment to go look at cars. I remember feeling really good about everything at that moment. I felt a huge relief knowing that this big thing was finally getting taken care of. When his appointment came, my husband called me to tell me some good news. He had seen one car, decided it was good, and told me that this was the one we would be buying. While he was still in the dealership, I asked him to tell me the details, like how much the interest was and how much the car cost. I asked him if he had compared it to Kelly Blue Book to see if it was a fair deal. My husband was kind enough to ask the salesman everything, but after each question he added, "I'm sorry my wife is making this so difficult." I was pretty hurt and embarrassed by this and told him so, but he said all my questions were frustrating and were slowing down the process of the one thing I had asked him to do. In the end, he decided to wait for me to arrive so that we could sign for the car together. I ended up getting picked up from the airport and taken straight to the car dealership. We got a good interest rate on a car, but we ended up overpaying by about $7,000. I should have said no to the car and just looked myself, but I was young and embarrassed, and I felt like I wasn't being supportive. Thankfully, that car ended up being our only shared piece of property in our divorce. I didn't trust him to refinance the car, so I ended up taking it. We owed so much more money on that car than it was worth that I couldn't get it refinanced for several months. I ended up trading it, and even though I'm still in the hole financially because of it, I am so much happier now. We did try therapy before ultimately divorcing. My ex-husband was quite the prodigy. He was cured, his words not mine, after a week. He said that he had it all figured out and didn't see the point in continuing. He also told me that he was the only one who had ever put any effort into the relationship and that it was 100% my fault that we were divorcing. He told me that no one would ever love him again if I left, and that he might as well off himself because there was no point in going on. When that didn't work, he said that no one would ever love me again, and that I was lucky he had stayed around as long as he did. He then asked me if I would forge his signature on the divorce documents because I was basically forcing him to do it anyway. I did not. Anyway, I'm happy to report that he was successfully able to move on from the trauma I put him through. He's still around, but I've kept my distance because I can't be bothered, so I'm unsure of what he's up to. I was able to find someone after some time. My boyfriend is so kind. Sometimes I feel like it's too good to be true. Then again, I get Twitter padded when he does simple things like taking out the trash, cooking, or maintaining a full-time job. So the bar is in hell. He's a great guy, and he does more than the bare minimum, I promise. Looking back, I knew that I wanted a divorce. I just wasn't ready to admit it. My ex-husband doesn't love or respect me. I didn't put many details about the relationship in my first post, and I don't really feel the need to put it all out there now. But I know now that if someone truly loves you, they make sure you know. Thanks, Reddit. You were right. Walking out on a marriage and untangling everything is really hard to do. You got married too young. It is amazing that you were able to do it. Enjoy your new life. P.S. The cured prodigy will find another poor woman who will live your same story. I very much hope she spots the red flags before it's too late. I feel like I dated one person and then married someone completely different. It was very surprising. Google weaponized incompetence girl. That reminds me of a post about the bathroom deep clean. The poster had a husband who didn't pull his weight at home or in their relationship. She's been asking him to clean the bathroom for ages, but he just wouldn't, or he'd half-ass it. So for her birthday, she caved and asked for a professional deep clean. She expected him to Google cleaning companies, shop around a bit, get a good deal, make an appointment for the clean, and pay for it. He couldn't do that for some reason. She reminded him, and he said he'd look it up, but never did. On the day of her birthday, he finally Googled it, loudly exclaimed it was ridiculously expensive, and said he'd do it himself to save money. So, he half-asked the cleaning job again. That was the last straw, and she divorced him. Yay you! That line about how nobody else would love you. I'm so glad that you didn't buy it. He must have been desperate to say that. He said a lot of things to try and guilt me into staying. I didn't realize how often he used that against me until separating from him, and it became so obvious. He said it a lot more subtly when we were together.